we talked about the first part of our monthly theme when we talked about the mundane and the sacred. And I teased that today we were going to talk about profanity. The profane being a third way that we perceive aspects of our lives, the everyday kind of mundane stuff, the sacred and the spiritual stuff, and then lastly, the very not spiritual, the profane stuff. So what does it mean to be profane? When we think of profanity, we often think of cuss words, right? That's what we mostly think of. Or maybe pornography or other expressions of like raw sexuality, or maybe unconventional ideas about God, or not treating with deference the things that others find sacred or holy. So profane is a word that refers to that which is associated with the secular and not religious. It's considered an antonym of the sacred. So, but as we expand our thinking, we understand that God is present in every experience, including the profane. So in the Science of Mind, we talk about the fact that life is creative, and who are we to judge the creative expression of spirit itself? So the profane invites us to a deeper understanding of the oneness of life. The profane is what challenges us to expand our acceptance beyond things of our own personal comfort. But we got to remember that the concept of profanity changes from culture to culture. You know, a thumbs up, that's a positive sign in our American culture, but it's the equivalent of kind of giving the middle finger in Middle Eastern countries. Is it profane or is it not, right? In Japan, tipping money for services is considered insulting. Yet here in America, it's insulting to not tip for good service. Sexuality is taboo in some cultures, and then in others it's embraced and celebrated. Certain types of sexuality are forbidden in some cultures, while other cultures allow freedom of sexual expression more freely. A woman showing her hair is forbidden in some cultures, and in another, a woman's hair is her glory, and yet in another, shaving a woman's head can either be a sign of devotion to God or a way to punish an act. In one family, a certain set of words are considered profanity, while right next door, the same words are spoken freely and considered neutral. So what do we do with all of that? Like, how do we weigh all that out? The bottom line is that human beings are free to categorize experiences, words, gestures, substances, images, whatever, as sacred, mundane, or profane. And we're going to be influenced by the society around us, naturally, but it truly is an inside job, an individual job for you to decide what is profane for you. And how we choose to think creates our experiences, because there's no big book of rules that defines these things. We do. There are no definite definitions of these different categories. There are cultures who really punish those that defy the rules of profanity, and we as Americans are often shocked by that extremism, right? Much of the conflict within a society is about what is to be considered and revered as holy, and what is to be avoided or even punished as profanity. And an individual either goes along with what is culturally expected or makes their own rules and lives by them. We were talking about that in Sacred Cup this morning, finding your own path. And what I have learned is that those who live freely without conforming to cultural norms are very judged and despised by those who follow the rules, and vice versa. But our invitation is the middle way, the Tao. But can you do that as an individual? Can you do that? How do you react when someone or a group of someone's cross your personal definition of the profane? Can you remain open-minded? Can you? And choose to see the sacred anyway? Let's take a pretty tame example. Let's take cussing, okay? So as a mom, I remember even before my daughter was born, I made the decision to decriminalize cussing, okay? So growing up, we were absolutely forbidden to use profanity. I mean, like, not acceptable at all. As a matter of fact, I remember getting my mouth washed out with soap for cussing out my brother because he and his friend were playing in my playhouse, and I did not like that one bit. Yet I remember my father cussing whenever he wanted to, like when he got really mad or he was frustrated. So as young as I was, I could see the hypocrisy in that, right? So I decided that whenever I was a parent, cussing was not going to be something I policed in my home. So, and most of you know I have a daughter. My daughter Kelsey, when she was very young, I taught her that all words were neutral and she could say whatever words she wanted to say. However, it was her job to learn what was appropriate in every situation she was in, and she had to face the consequences if she said the wrong words at the wrong time. Now, you may or may not know that I can cuss like the best of them, right? I just refrain when I'm doing my work, like here, right? Most of the time. So of course, Kelsey heard us using cuss words, and she quickly learned them, and actually, she was really good at it, But I wasn't going to bail her out if she cussed at school or, got in trouble or whatever. And she was not allowed to use any word in disrespect or as a verbal attack. That was the rule. And I wanted her to learn that certain words were inappropriate in certain situations, and I especially warned her that her grandparents were very proper, and she should never, remember the soap? She should never use curse words around them. So for the most part, that rule really worked out pretty well, beautifully actually, and Kelsey handled herself pretty well. But there's one funny story. So one Christmas morning, she was at her grandparents' house, Suanne's parents, not mine. And she was opening one of those presents that was in that god-awful plastic that you basically need a jackhammer to get toys out of, like plastic and ties and all that. And she was struggling, but she was at that age, she did not want any help. I think she was about 3. She wanted to open it herself, and she's like pushing away help, and she's pulling and tugging. And so after several minutes of that, she raised her little 3-year-old face in utter frustration, and she said, "Mommy, what is the word that I'm supposed to say besides damn it?" And everyone laughed. Everyone laughed just like y'all. But the bottom line is I wanted her to use situationally appropriate language. And she knew it. And I want us all to do that, actually. External rules don't tend to work very well when it comes to language. Am I right? Right. So you might be amused to know that there's this ministerial email chain for all the CSO ministers. And we have had several debates over the years about whether or not it's appropriate for ministers to use profanity in the pulpit. Some of us take the stand that it's beneath the dignity of the position and the role that we do. And some of us feel like cussing humanizes us or whatever, but I don't think any of us believe that it's unholy or profane or non-sacred. It's just a kind of a personal preference, but the emails that go back and forth are hysterical. But sometimes, how we handle the profane can be more challenging than just curse words. Anytime something is simply a matter of opinion, external rules or laws, it just don't work very well. Humans tend to come up against these kinds of limits, and what do? We rebel, right? I actually saw in the news earlier this week that our legislature here in Florida is going to be entertaining a bill to legalize recreational marijuana once again. To follow that trend that other states have already taken. And they're going to be wrestling yet again with the same questions humanity has been debating for ages. Is marijuana a harmful drug or a medicinal plant that serves as an alternative to prescription medications? Bottom line is, it doesn't matter what laws are passed, what government or religious authorities decide. Individuals are going to choose for themselves whether to use drugs and alcohol in their personal lives or not. And this may lead you to wonder if anything is truly profane. So what I consider profane is anything that does not square up with the spiritual truth that we are all one and that we are all to be treated with dignity and respect for life. The horrible ways that humans treat each other could be considered profane. Governments that value the lives of the rich while their country's inhabitants and citizens are hungry and living in the street, that could be considered profane. The tolerance of things like human trafficking and mass incarceration and policing of impoverished people may be considered profane. Or maybe religious organizations focus on traditions of exclusion and rituals of separatism instead of the invitation to deepen one's relationship with spirit could be considered profane. Those definitions of profanity make way more sense to me than the traditional considerations of the word. Bottom line is that human beings are here. We're here to have human experiences. Our invitation is to see the sacred in all things and realize that we have free will to explore the world around us on this human plane as we wish. There are very big consequences when we defy the natural law to be loving and life-affirming, but we are not the spiritual police. We are not the spiritual judicial system for anyone else. Judging is not a wise practice. Pam Grout wrote in Think and Grow Rich, she said, "Judge not means more than refraining from judging others. It also means keeping your consciousness open." What would happen if you kept your mind wide open to consider all possible paths as worthy of discovery? What would you learn about yourself and others and the universe around you, quite frankly, if your entire world was wide open? Ernest Holmes says, "To suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe would create man in bondage and leave him bound would be to dishonor the creative power which we call God. To suppose that God could make man as an individual without leaving him to discover himself would be to suppose an impossibility. Individuality must be spontaneous. It can never be automatic." He makes it clear that the exploration of life, our bodies, our world, and humanity is a holy experience. The creative intelligence of the universe invites us to explore our own understanding of what we identify as profane, to truly discover and express our authentic nature. The words we use, the clothes we wear, how we style our hair, the way we present ourselves, those things do not define us, nor do those things define anyone else. We are all divine expressions of God. And I love it, I absolutely love it, when cultural figures brazenly arise that push on that edge of profanity to wake us up, actually, even when they might cause us to squirm a little bit. You know, a lot of creatives, like musicians, do that, and they always have, is they infuriate the culture police of the day, right? The Beatles did it with their long hair, and Elvis did it with his hips, and Lizzo is doing it with her refusal to be body shamed, and the list could be very long, right? I remember when Lady Gaga pushed against cultural norms. Lady Gaga was actually the first concert I ever took my daughter to, speaking of my daughter. And Lady Gaga embraced this edginess that I really wanted Kelsey to pay attention to. And she called her little edgy fans little monsters. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with her culture, and she encouraged them to stand together and be unique and support one another. And if you've ever been to a Gaga concert, the audience is full of fans dressed as sexually provocatively as you can imagine. They represent the entire spectrum, the LGBTQIA, whatever spectrum, gender fluidity for sure, but also people who understand that what may be considered profane is simply also an expression of individuality, and she champions that, and that audience admires creativity, supports and celebrates it. And Lady Gaga herself uses her body, her sexuality, her visual expression, and her music to push that edge of acceptance as far as she can, and she's brilliant at it. She's brilliant at it. The bottom line is, if someone is making you squirm, what are they pushing against inside of you in your understanding of what is normal and what is not? The personal question to ask yourself is, what do I consider profane? or very not spiritual to the point that it makes me uncomfortable. Meditate on your relationship with the profane. Why does the profane make you uncomfortable? Just take some time to reflect on that. How can you identify and release judgment as it arises? What steps can you take to be more inclusive towards ideas and beliefs that make you uncomfortable? If you're someone who's uncomfortable with the profane, take some time to consider how comfortable you are with expressing yourself authentically. Or do those structures hold you into a small space too? Does your self-expression rub other people the wrong way? Are you able to stand in your truth like Lady Gaga does and all those other people I just named? Or do others' opinions of you affect how you present yourself? What I want to remind you of is the truth that you are a sacred being just as you are. Just as you are. Each of us has to decide how much we're willing to go against the grain to keep our authenticity in place. There are no right or wrong ways to navigate this, by the way. Sometimes it's appropriate to push the envelope and make a point, and sometimes it's easier to simply keep the peace, right? We know we're headed into the holidays. Often a time when spending time with family members or other groups of people who may be very different from us, right? And sometimes relatives disagree on what is sacred and what is profane. Can you relate to that? Right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable. And that can be tricky, especially when it's a holiday grounded in gratitude, right? So you may or may not be looking forward to this part of the year, but here is my invitation to you. Drop into gratitude for these things. I'm going to give you some things to be grateful for. Number one, you are a divine being, always connected to spirit, always, no matter what. Be grateful for that. 2, you are part of a community that honors and celebrates you just the way you are. Be grateful for this. Every person around you, whether they are a family member or friends or strangers, they're on their own path of growth and evolution, and you are not responsible for whether or not they get it. Be grateful for that. Number 4, no matter how difficult this holiday season may be, and no matter how absolutely magnificent this holiday season may be, this too shall pass. Be grateful for that. Number 5, your thoughts about things and events and people are what cause you to either enjoy the moment or despise the moment, and thoughts can change, even if it takes a minute or two to withdraw and ground yourself. Be thankful that thoughts can change. And 6, finally, every single detail is in place for you to either learn from or simply be blessed by, or to remind you of something you might want to remember. Everything is sacred. Be grateful for that. I'm going to close with 2 quotes, neither of which are on the slides. I saw Rebecca go, oh my God. One is from Maslow, and he said, "The sacred is in the ordinary. It is to be found in one's daily life, in one's neighbors, friends, and family, in one's own backyard. To be looking elsewhere for miracles is to me a sure sign of ignorance that everything is miraculous." And from one of my colleagues, Reverend Sunshine Day, she reminded me this past week. She says, "Everything I see is sacred. Everything I hear is sacred. Everything I speak is sacred." May we each remember this always. May you have a blessed Thanksgiving week. May you see yourself as the blessing that you are. Be yourself. Be yourself, and surround yourself with people who see you and love you. And so it is.
And so it is.